back to the No Score Review Show, where we have in-depth critique and nuanced discussion of some of the latest movies, video games, and television. I'm your host, Nick Green, and today is yet another solo review where I will be discussing The Last Voyage of the Demeter, a new horror film, a new Dracula horror film that takes place on the ship, the Demeter. It is a movie based on a couple chapters of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, which basically details all of the events that happened from the Demeter's voyage from Romania to London, I think. Um, and yeah, it's basically the ship that transports Dracula in his coffin and a bunch of other crates, mysterious crates on board, and the horrific goings on that ensue. This will be a spoiler free review. I will not be going into any major plot details or anything. I'll try and give a couple spoiler free highlights and lowlights. And we'll start with my general expectations of this film. I was very excited for this one. This was arguably probably one of my most anticipated horror films of 2023. And I tried to keep like temper my expectations. I was very much looking forward to it, but I wasn't putting a ton of expectation into it besides that. But unfortunately, I still managed to unfortunately get disappointed by it. It was a pretty mediocre film overall for me. It, I think, yeah, I think I actually put more expectations into it than I maybe should have. I was kind of hoping for more of a, like, I don't know, for lack of better terms, like a grittier or a darker, just like a more visceral feeling film. Like it's set in the 1800s. It's aboard uh, like a ship. I was expecting more in line tone wise to some like other period horror, kind of like like Robert Eggers films, The Lighthouse, The Witch, stuff like that. But it just felt so modern to me, just in like the filmmaking side of it all. I think like the set design was really nice and really well executed. I thought the creature design of Dracula was really cool. It was very different. It was more like Nosferatu inspired, and like he looked more like a bat, which I really appreciated. Definitely way more horrific and more like monster esque, and not just like a dude with fangs, right, aboard a vessel. Um, but yeah, it just felt so like modern and clean, and much too clean for my liking. So yeah, it was a bit of a letdown, unfortunately. Overall, it's like fine to like just not that great. It feels like a pretty by the numbers monster movie in terms of like character introduction and setup, and then slowly unpacking like the mystery aboard the Demeter, and then having a few characters get offed one by one slowly throughout the film, and then like a big triumphant face off between some of the main characters and the monster of Dracula. But yeah, like it didn't wow me in any particular way, really. One of my big gripes, I would say, is the look of Dracula overall. Like conceptually, like I said, he looks really cool, and it was a very cool design. But I was really let down by like he's not in it that much. Like there's only actually a few scenes with him in detail, no more than a handful, like no more than double digits, I would say, like uh approaching double digits. um and most of those shots like are VFX heavy, and like to their credit, like this Dracula has wings and he's flying around and whatnot. So I understand it in that regard, but like, I don't know, something about the actual execution of his look in the film just didn't. It's not that it felt undercooked, it just felt like it was out of place, maybe. Um, just having it be so VFX heavy, there was a disconnect for me in actually seeing him on screen, but be like VFX laden. So I was kind of also hoping for more, like, if anyone who has seen Midnight Mass, I was hoping for something a little bit more akin to that design and actually be a practical, like, costume creature design. Overall, I think there were maybe two shots throughout the entire film that like looked good to me. Um, so yeah, that was a bit of a letdown. And then just like the promise of having a horror film set at sea uh, was a bit like underwhelming as well. As someone who has like a growing fear and respect for the ocean, I definitely think they maybe could have leaned a little bit more into that and play into maybe some of the more cosmic horror aspects of that. Maybe that's not the right film for this type of, or maybe that's not the right type of tone for this film, I should say. But yeah, I was kind of hoping for more of that. Um, Kind of the tones that were evoked in like The Lighthouse, for example. That's like ocean ocean adjacent, and I really liked that film and was kind of hoping for more of that here. But that I guess is just more me putting my expectations onto this film a little bit. um, like speaking of the set design again, I think that's one of the strong suits is like you are able to develop a sense of awareness and placement on the ship, like where everything is laid out. They do a really great job of setting all of that up, I think, and like where the characters are in relation to one another and like where everything happens on the ship, I think is really well executed. The blocking of this film I think is strong. Another kind of weak point, I guess, is like the characters overall, like the cast of characters just didn't wow me that much. Like Liam Cunningham, I loved him in Game of Thrones and was really excited to see him in this film. Like he fit the bill perfectly, but honestly, he just kind of felt wasted. His Captain Elliot didn't ultimately do that much. He was more of a side character than anything, which is almost crazy to think about because like the story or the chapters that this film is based on is Captain Elliot's account of the goings on the Demeter from their voyage to Romania or from Romania to England. So him kind of taking a backseat felt a little crazy to me, honestly. Um, Corey Hawkins as the lead, I thought he was serviceable. I thought he was okay. I don't think they gave him like a ton to work with. His motivations felt pretty lackluster and pretty like they were almost too generically relatable of like how he frames his motivations and everything. It just felt so disconnected almost. But yeah, he was okay. I didn't hate him overall. Uh, I will do my best to pronounce this, but Aisling Franciosi as Anna. She's like one of Dracula's like victims that he brings aboard in all of these different crates. She was, I thought, was actually quite good. Her character justification felt a little weird at first, but I warmed up to her over time, and she ended up being one of the strong players towards the end of the film. I thought. Um, and then Woody Norman, I thought, was also pretty good. He popped up in, or he was kind of the lead almost in Cobweb in what was it, July, I think. So he's having a pretty good year so far. I thought he did a serviceable job, and his character situation takes a crazy turn that I was not expecting for the film. Also, great to see David Dastmalchian. I think that's how you say his name. As the first mate Wojek. He also didn't get a ton to do, but he was great in the role that he had, I thought. But the rest of the crew was pretty forgettable. I mean, like already the main players aren't that like crazy good. So yeah, everyone else that kind of takes a side saddle to them is merely like they're merely fodder for Dracula to tear through, I think. Um, so yeah, there's not any super memorable performances or anything, unfortunately. As far as the scares go, it's like pretty generic horror film, like lots of cheap jump scares and like just fake outs of characters looming around the ship looking for weird noises that are happening, only to be like scared by a rat or something, or another sailor, right? A crewmate. Yeah, it wasn't great. I think a lot of the dread was lacking in the film. I think there could have been a much better sense of dread that they built up through the film. Um, but yeah, uh, I think another thing they could have done better is the tension between the crew themselves. I haven't actually read the like original book itself, so I don't know the crew's relationship with one another, or if they go into that much detail with it. But I think they could have really uh, driven home that sense of tension and paranoia, maybe with the crew members, and like really butting heads on like how to handle the situation. We get like a tiny little bit of that, but I don't think enough for it to be that compelling. They like scratch the surface, if that, for the conflict between the sailors. Overall, I think this was a pretty underwhelming experience. I was really excited to have a like cool, great, scary film set at sea. I've wanted one of those for a few years now, and this had the promise of it. I love period horror as well. Like it's such a otherworldly like setting that it really lends itself to the horror genre, I find. But I just don't think this film stuck the landing on either of those fronts. So I'm saddened to say that it's not quite a recommendation from me. I might give it a second chance on screen on streaming once it comes there, but yeah, for now, I would say wait for streaming. There are other much better horror films that have come out this year that I would easily recommend over this one. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the last voyage of the Demeter. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, or you can tag me on all the socials at No Score or at No Score Reviews. Otherwise, you can stay tuned to wherever you're listening to or watching this episode of the No Score Review Show. I recently did, speaking of other spooky horror movie reviews, I did a recent review with Allison from the Who's There horror podcast with for Talk to Me and Cobweb. You can find us talking about those two films on that video. Uh, Kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, I did a review on the new Ninja Turtles movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Go check those out. Otherwise, yeah, thank you all so much for watching and listening to this episode, and we'll catch you in the next review. Bye bye.